right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Again, as I mentioned, for any of you who just joined us, my name is Ali Simon. Pronouns are she and her. I'm the senior lead of Wellbeing and Healing Justice with Social Justice Partners. And we really created this session as an opportunity to be in conversation. The title of the session today is Understanding the Nervous System During Times of Crisis and Grief. I think after, the many weeks of what we've been seeing happening here in Los Angeles, in our communities throughout and just around like the nation as a whole, the world really. Our well-being series that we offer every month is an opportunity to drop in and engage in our well-being and care for ourselves. But we wanted to make sure that we were resourcing folks with ways that they can be taking care of themselves right now, considering the political landscape that we're in and all of the things that we're all holding individually and collectively. With that being said, I'm not going to take up too much time because we only have an hour, and I want to make sure Angelica has all the time that she needs to kind of really lead us into this conversation. But Angelica, come on in. Welcome in. I'm
Thank
passing it
you.
over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hey, y'all. I appreciate your time. It's so valuable to take your time in the middle of the day to join us. This is like so personal to me because I have been in the world of social work for 15 plus years. And towards the tail end, I was working at a unhoused shelter during the pandemic for all female identifying folks. And I think after doing it for so many years, my body started to run down. And I just noticed very repeated or very common health issues amongst just the women I was serving. And so I got really curious about that. And I transitioned out of social work to fully dive deeply into the body, understanding how physical illnesses are very rooted in trauma, very rooted in emotional suppression, very rooted in historical trauma. And so that kind of lands me where I'm at now. I work with women of color to focus on their bodies, healing through their bodies, not just the coping and the treating, but really getting deep into the root issues. So day in and day out, I work with the body. And I love working with the body because our body is real honest. And a lot of folks, we have to live in our head. So when I was a talk therapist, it was a lot of head movement and a lot of talking. And naturally, I lean into the introverted side of things. So it burned me the hell out. And so I work with folks now to kind of drop below the head into the body. And so when I was asked to kind of share this today, it was like an absolute hell yes. Like every ounce of me wants to be here to be a resource. But we got an hour, so I'm trying to take too much time. I'm going to get into the PowerPoint. At any point in time, if there's any questions or maybe something deeply resonates with you, please, please, please put it in the chat. I'm hoping we have a little bit of time to kind of go into that because I love conversation. If I had to choose between PowerPoints and conversation, I'd be chopping it up all day. But let's do some PowerPoints because I want to really provide visuals. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me know. Okay, thumbs up if y'all can see that. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, to kind of ground us today, it's just understanding the nervous system during times of crisis and grief, which we were just talking about are just energies on the opposite sides of the spectrum. Um, and I can get so informative and add all of this information regarding the nervous system. But what I'm not trying to do today is overwhelm your minds because if we zoom out and look at the collective health of our community, we are probably already overwhelmed. So I'm going to try to keep it simple. I'm going to try to keep it just very direct. And we're going to start with today, just what felt right to share. My favorite number is three. So I was like, you know what? Let me just pick three things out of these three topics. And so I'm going to share just three insights about the nervous system because if you go on social media, there is so much information about the nervous system. It is so just dense. And then three supportive tools or practices or resources. Sometimes the things that are suggested for us actually exhaust us more. So I really was intentional about what to provide as like tools or resources to kind of take you out of the exhaustion. And then just 3 really explorative questions to get you to a deeper understanding within yourself of what you genuinely desire when it comes to care and connection, because that's typically something we're providing and not something we're always receiving. So I wanted to start here because I absolutely love this picture. So the visual to your right is our nervous system. It runs through our entire body from the bottom of our feet to the tops of our head. It almost looks like branches, right? And then the picture to the right of that is the roots of a tree. It's the part of the tree we don't see. It's underneath the ground. And underneath the ground, these kind of branches of the trees, they actually communicate with other trees. Trees can actually know if a tree needs water or if a tree gets hurt, and they can actually communicate. And so that is just the mirroring function of our own nervous system. Everything is talking to each other. So I put the nervous system is a network of communication that runs through our entire body. It is constantly receiving and processing information. Like even right now, our nervous system is like feeling my tone, looking at the colors, looking at other people, it's constantly receiving and processing. It's kind of like the highway or the freeway between our mind and our body. And that's why when we are dysregulated, we don't always know what's going on in the body, because that has to be what gives. Because when we shift into survival, we are brain dominant, we are mind dominant, because the brain is wired for survival. The nervous system basically controls and connects to every damn thing. But I gave you some examples because it's important. But this is a lot of the work I do because a lot of people that have, let's say diabetes or digestion issues or sleep issues, they really feel empowered when they understand how deeply connected it is to our nervous system. So it controls and connects to our breathing, just the pattern of our breath, our heart rate, our digestion, our appetite, the temperature of our bodies, our focus, our sleep, our senses, our sense of touch, smell, our vision, the movement of our body, our learning, our comprehension, and also our emotions. So very, very, very tightly connected to everything. And it's just our reminder that we are deeply connected to nature. So that's why I wanted to provide a visual to that. The second thing about the nervous system, right, is, we could totally talk about like stress responses and trauma responses. And I think it's a little bit more information that is kind of more accessible, right? Freeze, fight, flight. But I think something that's really simple, but really, really effective to keep in mind is we know that our nervous system is where these trauma responses are stored. And I don't know if we also know that they're also passed from body to body. So our trauma response or our stress response can be an evolved way of how our ancestors had to survive. And so they can show up in those 4 categories of freeze, fight, flight, and fawning. Fawning is a newer trauma response. The first 3 are actually based in animals. So like a freeze response would be how a turtle survives. A fight response could be how like a lion survives, but fawning is specific to humans. That can also be thought of as like people pleasing, where you kind of self-abandon your thoughts, your emotions, your needs, your desires, and completely are externally focused. So that's what fawning means. Okay, so this slide is meant to just kind of provide an easy way to understand our bodies. Is just to remember that we are either in a state of connection or we are in a state of protection. And what determines that is our perceived sense of safety. And I say perceived, not to sound fancy, but to tell y'all that you can be in a room, you could be in your home, and you can get this crazy sense of anxiety. And you're like, I'm home, I'm with people I know, this is my bed. Like, so you know that you're safe, but there may be something in your mind that you're thinking of that creates anxiety in your body. So it's really about the perceived sense of safety. And working with unhoused folks or working with unhoused neighbors of ours, sometimes there's an expectation that when they are provided shelter or food, that they are going to feel safe. And sometimes that could be so far from the truth. And so, yeah, the body is in a state of connection, which we can say is like regulation, or it is in a state of protection, which is survival or dysregulation. This really helps just understanding and building awareness within ourselves and with the kind of the folks we work with. So this was kind of the second thing I wanted to share about the nervous system. It's crazy just talking to yourself because I don't know if I'm going slow or fast. Uh-oh. Okay. So the next one. Okay. So this might, might seem weird that someone who works with the body for 5+ years, regulation ain't it. So there's a lot of things that my clients come to me about of like, I just want to learn how to regulate myself. I want to regulate. I want to regulate. And I completely understand the intention. And I know that there's thousands of different practices to regulate yourself out there. But when we think of the body, like our actual body, our bodies don't need to actually be in a constant state of regulation. That actually is against the natural flow of the body. What our bodies need is to be present. Our bodies need to be present with this current moment, with the current words I'm saying, with the current visual we're seeing, with the current chair we're sitting in, with the current clothes we have on. The body is desiring presence, like to be very present. So I would say that presence or being present is like being with. You are in this moment being with everything that is around you, everything that is within you. Sometimes regulation, when we're seeking it, it's a way to not be with and to try to shift into a different state. So I wanted to say that, and sometimes it kind of surprises people that this is kind of what I believe or kind of what I practice, because when we're dysregulated, that's a very smart, intelligent response. That's the response we have to shift into in crisis. Now, the reason why dysregulation might become unhealthy or unsafe is when we stay stuck in dysregulation, when it then becomes chronic. So if being present means that you're regulated and being dysregulated kind of means that you're not present, then that helps you understand that it's really difficult for the body and the mind, the spirit and the heart to be really present with exactly what's going on, because the nervous system is still stuck in a different response. And so ways that you can kind of gently notice this within yourself, or maybe the folks you work with, is ability to be present, where we just talked about, but pace. The pace in which we move, the pace in which we talk, the pace in which we get things done, the pace, right? So if we apply this to the two topics for today, crisis, well, crisis will increase our pace. We'll go faster, typically in crisis, especially as a responder. But grief will slow our pace. Grief has density to it in the body. Energetically, it has more weight to it. And when there's energy in our bodies that feel weighted, it will kind of slow us down a little bit. That's why grief is really inconvenient to capitalism and to the systems we live in. Because if you've ever moved through grief while in, working within the systems or working at, somewhere, there's such an expectation to go quickly through it. Okay, cool. You get your 3 days off and then, check your emails when you get back in the office. So it's going against the natural pace in which grief really wants to move. Grief is really wavy and it's very dense and it slows us. So pace is really important. Gently noticing eye contact. You can kind of tell sometimes when you're with someone and you're engaging that their eye contact might not be able to be still. And that's usually because the brain and the nervous system is seeking, are there any threats? Where's my safety? It's feeling everything, it's scanning. And then, to go from the eyes to the ears, it's listening. Being able to genuinely listen, that really requires you to be in a state of connection or regulation. So regulation is when we are in a state to rest and digest. Can also be thought of like it's like when you return to yourself, when you feel back in that centered place within yourself. So those are the three things about the nervous system. When I was trying to think of supportive practices today, I honestly was like, okay, Joe, like don't give them something they can just Google, you know? So the first two, the first one that is so important to our bodies is to release. Most of the tension or stuckness in our body is created from holding, storing, or suppressing. And so, we might think, well, I ain't got no capacity or time, or, talk therapy isn't accessible to me. This isn't even like verbally releasing. This can also mean non-verbally releasing. So that can be anything from movement, walking, jumping, skipping, any kind of movement with your body. I always tell people to prioritize movement over exercise. Sometimes we're so attached to we have to exercise, but actually the body really desires movement. Laughter, that's a form of release. When you laugh, your belly moves, your chest moves, your facial expressions move, your mouth moves. Dance, play, crying, screaming, writing, creating, talking, you know, any kind of form of release, it can be so creative. Um, it's the reason why animals, they shake. If you have a dog and the dog is like gets startled, you'll notice that the dog will shake after. And so animals know that when a survival response comes to them or when stress comes in their bodies, they literally have to shake to release that energy out of their bodies because they won't survive with keeping those stored responses. Another practice is receiving. Ooh-wee, this is hard as a social worker, as a daughter who had to parent her parents, as an independent woman, as a therapist. It was so hard to receive. And I think that's a really supportive practice to the body. Allowing yourself to receive care, allowing yourself to receive concern, touch, gifts, eye contact, affirmations, um, just receiving and not feeling guilt or not feeling you have to do something in return, just really allowing yourself to receive. It's actually very healing to the body because it provides a sense of ease, and it gives the body like a breather away from this expectation or energy of like hyper independence. And so it is a bit uncomfortable. Maybe the body gets a little, awkward, and that's okay. You don't have to move through receiving perfectly, but to allow yourself to receive, especially in a moment of crisis or grief, is actually really, really, really supportive to our nervous system. And the last one is grace. Um, and right, grace is talked about a lot, but grace can be really nourishing to our bodies and our hearts and our spirits. I was thinking in this moment I would like stop sharing and then talk, but I'll just stay here, because sometimes it's nice to just talk while people are just looking at the visuals. But the insight I have with grace is actually understanding it in a deeper way when it comes to our needs, because that really allows us to move away from shame and move to grace, move to actual grace within ourselves. So we all have needs. Some of us are aware of our needs. Some of us are not aware of our needs. Some of the heavy hitter needs is connection, safety, peace, love. And so when we're younger, we still have these needs. They're actually, extremely important to our livelihood. And to get those needs met, we have to have a strategy. So a strategy is what we do to get a need met. Great example is when I was younger, love is a need, right? And when you're a baby, you don't have a lot of access to strategies, right? So crying is a strategy to get a need met, whether it's attention, love, food, right? So as babies, we have a very limited amount of strategies to get these needs met. A tantrum, a temper tantrum is what we called it, right? Well, that's a strategy to get a need met. There's a need under every single ounce of our behavior. And so how this applies to us now is maybe you're moving through crisis with clients, maybe you're moving through grief, but then you notice yourself doom scrolling and you're just like on your phone. And then you're like, damn it, I know that's unhealthy. I know that's not good. I should go outside. I should ground. Well, I would encourage you to look at that through a different lens of that's just your strategy to get a certain need met. And maybe that need is to unplug. Maybe that need is to release. Maybe that need is to feel connection. Maybe that need is laughter. There is a need underneath our behaviors. And so I think looking at it through that lens helps us not feel as much shame. You know, if like work is crazy and you're feeling the wrath of like everything going on in our communities, and you're like, you know what, all I've been doing is like ordering food, right? Oh, I shouldn't spend the money. I should cook. It's not healthy. Totally understand. I'm not taking it away from that. But maybe ordering food is your strategy to get your need met of feeling cared for. Maybe that getting, you know, Uber Eats or something is your strategy to feel ease or rest because you don't have to go in the kitchen and cook it all and clean. There's always a strategy connected to our needs, yet I feel like there's so much judgment around it. So I just wanted to like gently place that there. Okay. So, you know, some people are like, those are cute. Those are great. Those are cute. They don't work for me, or they're not accessible for me, or they're not connecting to me. That is no problem. So if these don't connect or they might not feel accessible, I just gently encourage you to think of your five senses. So what, you know, starting with our eyes, what makes you feel seen? Or maybe what visuals feel really calming and safe to you or your body? Moving to our ears, what makes you feel heard? Or what is something you can listen to that makes you feel loved or comforted or joy, or it takes you back to a memory that feels really good to your body or to your heart? Then moving to our mouth, what, you know, what tastes make you feel like nostalgia, or maybe feel like really nourished, or made you feel really cared for when you were younger? You know, sometimes you can eat a meal and it's like, damn, that felt like a warm hug. That's not just a saying. Deeper than that saying is it literally is received through the body, through the nervous system as affection or through care. Touch. What type of touch feels really safe or secure or caring or warm to your body? I don't think we think about touch enough when it comes to helping our nervous systems, you know, come back into regulation. Touch is really important, you know, whether that's a hug or whether that's a handhold, whether that's you hugging yourself, whether that's a massage, like touch can have a different relationship with each person. And then smells, you know, aromatherapy, you know, sometimes it is nice to lean into certain smells that shift your mood or shift your energy or remind you of something. Smells are the quickest senses of ours that activate, or I'm sorry, that access our memories. You know, you can smell like, oh, that smells like my grandma, or oh my gosh, that smell reminds me of like this random lip gloss in seventh grade. You know, so smell is also really powerful, and it can be really, really supportive. Okay, so when I think of the nervous system and I think of crisis and I think of grief, and it's two things I'm very, very familiar with. I was a de-escalating point person for like 3 years at a shelter. And if anyone has had experience in that, it is not a role where you can not be in crisis. You know, there's crisis daily. And then, you know, with crisis, there's grief. And so when I think of what is one thing that can sustain us as a community, as a collective, as individuals, as families, it's connection. And that's not just emotionally, romantically, that is our bodies. So our bodies can only go so long without connection. We are interconnected species. So we absolutely need connection. So I just feel like sometimes connection is a little bit neglected when it comes to moving through crisis or grief. And so I just wanted to put this slide as like just a gentle pause to kind of just ease the mind of all the things that are being said and all the slides we're going through, and just really ground in and like connection is actually the thing that sustains us. Okay. Gentle reminder, these slides will be emailed to you, but if you would like to write these down now, beautiful. If not, beautiful. So I just thought about 3 questions to kind of sit with within yourself when you have capacity and when you have desire. The first one is, what are the top 3 emotions you feel most? And that could be something, whether it's because of personal life, social life, or work. And there's kind of like a 2-part to this question. So you kind of connect to those 3 emotions. And I'm also going to email like resources over to help with these questions as well. But once you connect to those 3 emotions, then what do you feel your body needs or desires most when you're actually feeling these emotions? So when you're actually feeling sad, do you feel connected to what your body needs sometimes? When you're feeling joy, when you're feeling despair, when you're feeling rage, to get really curious about what your body kind of needs. Sometimes our bodies needs movement, sometimes our body needs rest, sometimes our body needs another person. So just kind of get curious about what your body needs or desires in those, when you're feeling those emotions or those energies. And the second question is, how do you desire to be cared for? I work with so many space holders, so many eldest daughters, so many frontline workers, so many therapists, so many mothers. And usually the first question I ask them when we start working together is, who takes care of you? And it honestly is like a really vulnerable moment. It really like hits straight to the heart. And so I think it's a great start to really allow yourself permission to sit down and just think about and feel into, how do you genuinely desire to be cared for? Not what's realistic, because sometimes we do that, right? But sometimes it's so honoring of our truth when we can just connect to what we truly desire or how we desire to be cared for. And the last one is grief. When they told me I had an hour, I said I could spend an hour on grief. But, I'm trying to kind of balance going over the multiple things. And so grief is wavy. It's a very wavy experience. And like I mentioned before, grief slows us down. Grief can be stored in our lung space. Traditional Chinese medicine believe that certain emotions are stored in certain organs in our bodies. And so grief can, according to TCM, can be stored in our lungs. Sometimes it's the root of asthma. Sometimes it's the root of COPD or breathing issues. When you think of grief being felt in the body, your breath is very affected. Your chest is very affected. And so when we think of grief as love, sometimes grief is the deepest form of love. But when we think of grief as love, I'm just curious of, what can it teach you about your love? So when thinking about grief, when thinking about feeling grief or moving through grief or experiencing grief, just to get curious about what it can teach you about your love. Very unique question. People kind of look at me a little crazy when I ask this, or gave me a little bit of side eye, because it doesn't make sense when you think about it. But when you actually drop into it and you allow yourself the time to be in a space of grieving, there's so much it can teach you and tell you about your own love. So that's the third question. And the bonus is, what makes you feel most connected to your feet? Another question that people are just like, huh? We don't look at our feet often. We don't look down very often. If you think about our day-to-day, right? It's very normalized to not look down, to not look at the earth, to not look at the ground, to not look at our feet, right? Maybe we look at our feet when we like come out the shower, or we look at our feet when we know we need a pedicure. We look at our feet when we put our shoes on, right? But that's a very specific and small context in which we spend time with our feet. So just planting a seed of what makes you feel really connected to your feet. And it is totally okay if the answer is, I have no freaking clue, or I don't know. But just by me asking you this question and just by you seeing the question, I guarantee you it will subconsciously just swirl around in your brain and in your body. And that's all I want. So yeah, these are the three questions that I just wanted to kind of have folks sit with. And I think I just wanted to provide a visual. This will all be emailed to you as well, but just showing the waviness of grief and just showing how it can move from an energy of shock to an energy of calmness to an energy of confusion. It's a full emotional experience. So yeah, I just wanted to place the visual here and also just, to talk about grief is a journey. And so when they said we'll be talking about crisis and grief, I was like, man, there's so much to say about grief, but I'm really trying to like hone it into just keeping it a little bit simple. And so I think that completes all the slides. So this was just like, hey, thank you. And I'm just sending all your hearts a big hug. To everyone present, all the slides will be emailed to you so you don't have to feel like you have to rush through anything, plus a couple other resources, and then also my contact info. But it's a little over halfway through. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see if there's any questions, comments, or thoughts. Okay, so I can go through, or did anyone just kind of like peep the chat to see if there's any specific questions that they want to read to me out loud, or I can try to answer?
It looks like two folks had a question around that, your last question around grief and love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Any specific, okay, so say more. So when we think of grief, we often think of grief as loss, and we're very conditioned to think of grief as death. But grief is expansive. Grief can be you loss, you're losing a certain role at a job, a certain relationship, you're losing a certain connection to your body, you're losing a certain visual of your body, you're losing a certain relationship with a child. Like, we experience loss so frequently, not just death. And so the grief is actually very embedded in how we are able to love people. So, meaning the more you allow yourself to experience grief or honor your grief or acknowledge your grief or attend to your grief, the proportion of your love and your grief, they're so proportional. So when you allow yourself to acknowledge all of the things that you have lost, all of the relationships, all of the memories, all the experiences, all that, you are able to love in a different degree. Because think of a reservoir, right? Think of the reservoir of grief and love. They exist in the same reservoir. And if we have all of this unstored grief, then love can't take up as much space. And when we're able to release the grief and acknowledge it and get it loved on, then it's not filling up the reservoir. And so now there's so much more capacity for love. And so I know it's a bit unique to me that I talk about grief and love together, but I just think the work that I have done, if you take the context of unhoused folks, they experience so much grief from such an early age. And when you think, I just think of a specific client, and when I think of her relationship with love, it was so strained. And that's because her grief was never acknowledged. And so maybe it's personal experience that brought me to kind of seeing it that way. I also think the body stores it in a similar way as well. But I hope that answers the question. Or if whoever asked it, if you like to know more insight or ask anything else, like, I love me some questions.
I have a question or maybe a comment. What I've noticed most as of late as someone that is currently grieving, trying to navigate like getting away from the shame of grieving, because I feel like some people are, when you tell them like, well, I'm grieving, it's kind of like, okay, well, when are you going to get over it? And it's like, never.
That part.
So I'm trying to work that in that even in my workspace too, with like my team, letting them know like it's okay to be in that space, and because you're not going to get rid of it. It doesn't go away. So I'm just trying to figure out what's that connection there and how to kind of like lessen the shame behind saying that you're grieving, or to move through it with your head held high, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. And our relationship with grief is rooted in colonization. That's the first birthplace of us thinking grief should be convenient and it should be quick and it should be fast and you should boom, 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 or don't even feel it. So it's deep, right? And it's like, I don't know if y'all know by now, but everything is deep to me. So in this little hour, I'm like, all right, Jill, just try to keep it light. But it is always going to be with you. And I think maybe providing insight that when we grieve something, there is a specific version of us that is most present with that grief. A really, personal example that I feel safe enough sharing is my mother has transitioned into hospice care. And there's a certain level of grief knowing she may be close to transitioning out of this physical realm. And there's still that little girl in me that is still desiring a relationship with her. And I have to grieve that I don't want to cuss because we're recording, but all the damn time. And so grief is connected to a very specific version of us. And just like you said, that version of us never goes away. So that's what keeps grief so present. And I think people that would shame someone for feeling are very avoidant. And to me, we can't change them. I don't know you. I don't know what you've been through. I'm gonna honor where you are in your journey, but I think a boundary is a beautiful way to stay in the protection of keeping your heart open, but not having someone shame penetrate that. So that's what comes up for me. I appreciate that question. I think there's another question from Beck.
Yeah, thanks so much, Angelica. This is Beck. So my question is with regards to something that was said during the presentation was that like talk about think about the love that you need, not the love that you think is feasible or something along those lines. Um, and so I was just wondering, like, since a lot of us are going through, especially during this time with everything happening in LA, um, what like how do we engage our support system effectively while they're also experiencing grief and crises, and like be respectful of their needs while also asking for our own?
Oh, you know what? That question, like, I wish so many people, and I'm in Long Beach, so I mean, I'm close to LA. I wish our community can hear that question loud and clear because so many folks are thinking it. Something I say sometimes is capacity trumps desire. So we can desire so much, but if we don't have the capacity to receive it, or someone doesn't have the capacity to provide it, that is going to trump what we want. So I think the first step is honoring self. Like, what is your truth in what you want to receive as far as maybe love, care, support? And then it does have to shift into the uncomfortable conversation around vulnerability of asking someone, this is what I desire. Do you have capacity? And trusting that that person may or may not be truthful, right? I think we sometimes, the inner parentified child in us, or the inner child that had to prioritize other people's needs when they were younger, sometimes our reflex is to know what other people need or know where other people are at. And I think what keeps the connection or the intimacy actually more like intact is asking. So, I would encourage, if it feels safe to you, of course, like, do you have capacity for this? Or I'm really desiring that, do you have the capacity or the energy, the desire for that? Like, that comes up, but I'm going to keep it a buck. I've desired things and my people didn't have the capacity for it. So I either had to get creative about it, or I had to grieve it, you know, and unfortunately, like that is part of it. But just you honoring your truth and all of that and feeling it is really, really like nourishing to your body. It's not going to be a pain-free experience, but it's going to be a very honest and like truth-led experience. So I hope that answered or tried to answer your question. Okay, I saw someone else's hand go up, but I don't remember the name. So if you have a question, please feel free to ask.
I'm happy to jump in. I had a question I dropped in the chat. I guess one of the things I'm thinking about right now is, I would say even for myself, just like I've been noticing just a lot, like considering like the number of attacks that are happening in our community and people just feeling uneasy around like what the future may hold. And, I will speak for myself when I say that, I guess like the anxiety around like fears of what's coming up or what's not coming up, or is this real, or what we see in the news and all of that stuff. And I know for myself, one of the things I tend to do is just kind of keep myself busy so that I don't have to like focus on it, and I can just like focus on the future I want to create. But I'm thinking about that as well as thinking about nervous system. Like, how do any of these things impact the nervous system, and how can like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know really what my question is fully, but I'm really just kind of holding the reality of like the times that we're in, and what the ways in which these practices can kind of support that right now.
Oh, thank you for asking that. We should not know how to move through times like these. I'm just going to say that loud and clear. Point blank, there's a period after that. Because if we do, then we normalize it. And this shit is not normal. So our response of being hyperproductive or busy or moving is a beautiful strategy that maybe meets a need of safety, that maybe meets a need of ease. So to first honor that and to not have any shame or guilt around your body shifted into a hyper, movement kind of energy. And on the flip side, sometimes that is our functional flight response, where flight speeds us up. It's anxiety, it's movement. And sometimes because we have to dissociate. If we're not dissociating in moments right now, that's like such an overwhelm. So I think dissociation gets a really bad rep. And I don't think the people that judge it and understand the body. So I think dissociating when you need to honor your nervous system and your body is absolutely intelligent. And also maybe the practice is balancing that with coming back into the present and just seeing how that balance helps and feels, and what it's such a trial and error. It's such an editing, like ain't nobody gonna get it right the first time. Like you really have to just check in, especially, if we identify as women, our capacity is ever flowing month to month, day to day. So that's where my brain goes. I think it's kind of the balance of the dissociation with being present, and both having to provide you with a bit of safety. So I don't know if that answered or helped, Allie, but thank you for.
Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. Heather, I think I see your hand.
Thank you. I appreciate this session very much. My question is about just your perspective around, I guess, the intersection of grief and crisis, and then also anger. Like there's a lot, I'm like really hearing so much anger from my clients about things that are going on, and I feel angry about how people are being treated globally and right here in Los Angeles. And just, I know that anger is often described as a secondary emotion, but I'm just curious about what you're thinking about, like grief, anger, crisis, all the things.
Oh man, I love anger. I love rage. I work with it so deeply. That's my best friend. Anger is a secondary emotion. And guess what it's rooted in? Sadness and grief. But okay, anger is important because it usually is telling us that we are experiencing an injustice. So anger is an absolutely normal emotion to feel. And an emotion a lot of our ancestors didn't have access to or safety to express. So sometimes when we feel anger or when we feel rage, sometimes it feels so overwhelming because it's not just our current self that's feeling it. It's actually accessing a lot of the rage and anger our ancestors couldn't feel. So sometimes people are very afraid to feel angry. And I want to just clarify, like, anger and rage is absolutely healthy and beautiful and human. The suppression of it is what equates to violence. So a lot of us grew up seeing the expression of anger as violence. And I just want to detangle those, because that's kind of the belief we start to believe as like adults, is like, I'm scared of it because I don't want to be this, or I don't want to hurt anyone. But anger itself is not dangerous. It is the absolute suppression of it, and it not getting safety or love or anything like that. Then it manifests as very harmful ways. So I think the connection between grief, love, and anger is the roommate upstairs, and grief and love are the parents downstairs. Because underneath anger is deep, deep, deep sadness. So after we allow ourselves to feel angry, usually there's a wave of like feeling a bit depressed or feeling a bit powerless or helpless or sad. And that's because that's the body letting you get to the lower emotion in the body. And anger is also stored in our liver a lot of times. And so that's why sometimes there is a connection with anger, liver, and alcohol. And so that, again, just shows you how connected the body is, like so connected. So I hope, Heather, that answered or touched on your question.
It did. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. I think I saw another question in the chat. Tied to grief, because yesterday I literally asked myself the question, can love exist without grief? Ooh. I don't know if I already answered that, but Crystal, if you want to ask that out loud, I'm gonna honor it. I'm just going to the chat. I think Rebecca, you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much for this session. It's just a lot of beautiful insights and feeling a lot of emotions. So just wanted to say thank you for that. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about bodies and presence, because that was really resonating with me, and I just would love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, okay, girl, we can't go too deep because I'm looking at the clock and I know An's about to tell me that I got 10 minutes left. Okay, bodies and presence. If you think of our relationship with our body, it's very reflective of our relationship with our inner child. And when you think of a child, the number one thing children desire is presence. It's presence. They want to feel you. That's why sometimes, people can get upset that you buy this kid this really expensive thing, and they're like, it's a need. It's not even what they desire, it's a need. And so that is our first birthplace of our relationship with our bodies, is when our body first desired someone else's presence. That reaction to that desire or that need, it starts to shape our perspective. And so then we start to build this relationship with our body of like neglecting that we really need to be present with our bodies because another person wasn't present with our bodies. And so when I say that the body really desires presence, it's because it allows the body to be truly, truly honored. Think about the body. The body's really present, right? Like our heart is beating right now. Imagine if our heart was like, I'm not trying to be present. Imagine if our brain was like, I'm not trying to be present. Our feet, our bodies are always present. So I think the body really desires presence because it's very honoring to our inner child. And that's the birthplace of our relationship with our bodies. So I don't know if that answered or gave insight. Yeah, of course, that's such a good question. These questions. Okay, I think I see another one. Joanne?
Yeah, so I trying to word my question. So I recently went through some very traumatic health, health things, and at one point I didn't remember even my own mom, and still to this day, it's been 2 weeks since I've been out of the hospital, but I'm still remembering a lot of what happened while I was unconscious. And at some points, I I feel that grief, but I don't know how to handle it just because I have had a lot of other, like, this is just the first time something to this level has happened to me. On top of everything that's happening, how do I balance grieving the fact that I almost passed away, but also wanting to just everything that's
Yeah.
also going on.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And, I deeply appreciate just that vulnerability and bravery. Balance is supposed to be the thing that we're most terrible at. I don't know if you all understand how capitalism works. I don't believe in work-life balance because it trains us and it conditions us that we have to get good at balance in order to not burn out, in order to be good at our jobs. And so I would release the pressure and the expectation to balance, to be honest. Like that's so much, right? I think it's just how do I be present with myself throughout the day, whatever that looks like. If it's out of proportion or out of balance, like, so be it. But your body and your mind and your heart and your community are all experiencing things. So to try to sit there and exert that energy to balance it all is so much weight. So I would just say, like, just go ahead and chuck the balance to the trash can for a little bit, just for a little bit, and just see how that feels. And then as you move through trying to be present with yourself, if you find yourself wanting to try to get back to figuring out that balance, that's also really, really beautiful and really honest as well. But I think presence over balance. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. I think someone else had their hand up, but I couldn't see it. Yes. Clement, I think your hand is up.
Hi, this is
Hi.
Clement.
Hi.
Just definitely resonated with the presence. I was like just reminded to look at my feet, like where am I at? And the idea of like presence being greater regulation. I've always said like, oh, gotta regulate, gotta regulate. But I mentioned like, I don't know, I think you touched on it, like regulation is still a part of the nervous system, right? And it's just like, I guess it was talking about parasympathetic, sympathetic, and sympathetic. So where does presence lie, or is there some sort of nervous system, studies, or the connection to this whole kind of I don't know, you could call like academia around it or science around presence. It's interesting.
I don't know that off top, but I hope there is. We don't like to study things that make us healthier, but I think on the internet there might be some really juicy studies on that. Presence requires our bodies to be regulated. So I think that's why I connect presence with regulation. But like crisis should absolutely shift you into a survival response. Like for someone to think they can move through crisis, like extremely present and completely regulated and just being able to have the best rest and sleep, like that's just unrealistic. So I think off top, I don't know any like studies or anything like that, but you know what, like the inner nerd in me is like, I want to find out. And so if you find any, let me know. And if I find any, I will let you know. But I just appreciate that question. It kind of like plants a little seed in my head.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Okay, so we're at 156. Again, just gentle reminder, if anyone would like to kind of just stay, I'm accessible. I'm going to hang out for a little bit. But I think, we can slowly start wrapping things up. Oh my goodness, thank y'all so much for being present, for taking the time. There's like 50 people up in here. I am sending your hearts, your bodies, your minds, your spirits, so much energy and so much love. And again, like the slides will be emailed to you. A couple of resources will be emailed to you. And then my contact info will be emailed to you. But Allie, if there's anything else, I think that's it for me.